What if the future wasn't just a mystery, but something whispered to us through time, something divine, cryptic, and utterly inescapable? For thousands of years, humanity has been gripped by prophecies, those eerie glimpses into what's to come, handed down by seers, oracles, and messengers who claim to speak for forces beyond our understanding. Think of the Oracle of Delphi, sitting in her smoke-filled chamber, her voice trembling with predictions that shaped the fate of empires, or the biblical prophets whose visions of fire and ruin foretold the rise and fall of kingdoms. These weren't just stories, they were threads woven into the very fabric of civilizations, pulling kings to their knees and sending armies marching toward destinies they couldn't escape. But here's the chilling question: were these prophecies truly glimpses of an unchangeable future, or were they warnings, invitations to alter our path before it was too late? That tension between fate and free will has haunted us for centuries. Every culture, every era has its own legends of divine foretelling, from the ancient Mayan codices predicting cosmic cycles to the cryptic revelations of Nostradamus, whose words still send shivers down our spine. These weren't just random guesses, they carried weight, authority, and an unsettling power to make even the most rational minds pause and wonder, is destiny written in stone, or can we rewrite it? That's the journey we're embarking on today, a deep dive into 30 of the most incredible, spine-tingling prophecies ever recorded. We'll travel across time and continents, from the whispered secrets of Tibetan mystics to the thunderous visions of Viking seers. Some of these prophecies came true with terrifying precision, while others remain enigmatic puzzles waiting for the right moment to reveal their meaning. And here's the most thrilling part: buried within these legends are clues about our own world patterns, warnings, and maybe even keys to understanding the forces that shape our lives. So settle in, because by the end of this, you'll never look at the future the same way again. High atop the slopes of Mount Parnassus, shrouded in the sacred smoke of burning laurel leaves, the Oracle of Delphi whispered secrets that would dictate the course of history. For centuries, kings and commoners alike made the treacherous pilgrimage to Apollo's temple, desperate for a glimpse of the future from the lips of the Pythia, the priestess who served as the god's mouthpiece. Her prophecies were never straightforward. They slithered through riddles wrapped in metaphor, forcing those who sought her wisdom to unravel their meanings at their own peril. Take King Croesus of Lydia, one of the richest rulers of his time. When he asked if he should wage war against Persia, the Pythia told him a great empire would fall if he attacked. Confident in his wealth and armies, Croesus marched to battle only to watch his own kingdom crumble. The oracle had spoken the truth, just not in the way he expected. That was the cruel beauty of Delphi's prophecies. They were always right, but never obvious. Modern science has peeled back some of the mystery surrounding the Pythia's trances. Archaeologists discovered that the temple stood directly over a geological fault line where ethylene, a gas known to induce euphoria and hallucinations, seeped from the earth. The priestess would sit on a tripod above this fissure, breathing in the intoxicating fumes before uttering her divine madness. But here's what still chills historians. Even if her visions had a chemical trigger, the prophecies she delivered were eerily accurate, shaping wars, political alliances, and the rise of entire civilizations. Was it mere coincidence, or was there something more at work in those smoke-filled chambers? The line between divine inspiration and earthly explanation blurs, leaving us to wonder if the ancients truly tapped into something beyond our understanding. Long before Rome became an empire, when it was still a fledgling kingdom struggling to carve out its place in the world, an old woman approached King Tarquin the Proud with an offer that would shape the destiny of his people. She carried 9 mysterious books filled with prophecies, divine warnings, and instructions for navigating the future. The woman claimed to be a Sibyl, a prophetess who channeled the voice of Apollo himself. But when Tarquin scoffed at her steep price, she burned 3 of the books right before his eyes, then another 3. Finally, shaken by her unwavering resolve, the king paid the original sum for the last remaining volumes. These became the legendary Sibylline Books, Rome's most guarded secret for centuries. Unlike the riddles of Delphi, the prophecies within these texts were shockingly direct prescriptions for salvation in times of crisis. When plagues ravaged the city or enemies gathered at the gates, Rome's priests would consult the books, following their instructions to the letter. Sacrifices to forgotten gods, grand temples built overnight, even bizarre rituals like burying live Greeks in the marketplace. These were the desperate acts of a civilization clinging to divine guidance. During Hannibal's invasion, when defeat seemed inevitable, the books warned that Rome would only prevail if a foreign goddess, Cybele, the Great Mother, was brought into the city. Senators sailed to Asia Minor, retrieving her sacred black stone, and soon after, Hannibal's unstoppable march faltered. Coincidence or something more? But the books weren't just a tool, they were a weapon. Emperors and generals twisted their prophecies to justify wars, purges, and political coups. And then, in a twist of fate as dramatic as any prophecy, the original Sibylline Books vanished. Some say they were destroyed in the fires that consumed Rome's temples. Others whisper that fragments were hidden, waiting to be rediscovered. What's undeniable is this: for hundreds of years, a handful of cryptic texts held the power to steer an entire civilization. Makes you wonder, if those scrolls had survived, would Rome's fall have been written differently? 500 years after his death, Decode Nostradamus, better known as Nostradamus, still grips the modern imagination like no other prophet. A French apothecary turned seer, he penned nearly 1,000 cryptic 4-line verses called quatrains, each a tightly wound riddle promising glimpses of wars, plagues, and world-shaking upheavals. What makes his prophecies so uniquely haunting isn't their clarity, but the opposite, their slippery vagueness, a deliberate fog of metaphor that lets every generation see their own reflection in his words. Take his most famous hit, the prediction of the Great Fire of London in 1666. One quatrain speaks of the blood of the just condemned by London, of fire hidden in the globes that would reduce the city to ash. And sure enough, a blaze sparked in a bakery consumed thousands of homes. But here's the twist: Nostradamus never mentions London by name, nor gives a precise date. His verses could just as easily describe any urban catastrophe. That's the genius and the frustration of his method. By layering symbols and avoiding specifics, his prophecies become a mirror, reflecting whatever fears haunt the era reading them. Then there's the chilling link to Adolf Hitler. Quatrain after quatrain seems to point to him. Hister, a name eerily close to Hitler, appears alongside mentions of a savage leader rising from poverty. Nostradamus describes mechanized war, skies darkened by strange birds, images later generations would interpret as tanks and warplanes, but dig deeper and cracks appear. Hister was actually an old term for the Danube River, not a person. The verses, written in a mix of French, Latin, and coded wordplay, are so elastic they could fit countless tyrants. So why does Nostradamus still fascinate us? Because his prophecies thrive on uncertainty. In times of crisis, pandemics, wars, political unrest, people instinctively scour his words for order in chaos. His quatrains become a Rorschach test for collective anxiety, their ambiguity letting believers find validation in hindsight. Scholars argue he wasn't a prophet at all, but a masterful student of history who recognized patterns. Empires rise and fall, cities burn, tyrants emerge. His true gift wasn't foreseeing the future, but packaging timeless human struggles in verses just vague enough to feel prophetic centuries later. Yet even skeptics pause at one eerie detail. Nostradamus claimed his visions came from staring into a bowl of water late at night, a practice that left him drained and trembling. Whether divine or delusional, his words have outlived empires. And that may be the most unsettling prophecy of all, the idea that humanity will never stop searching for meaning in the shadows of what's to come. Hinduism speaks of time not as a straight line, but as an endless cycle, 4 cosmic ages repeating like seasons, each with its own spiritual flavor. We currently live in the Kali Yuga, the darkest of these eras, where virtue crumbles and chaos reigns. But ancient texts like the Puranas promise this age won't last forever. Enter Kalki, the 10th and final avatar of Vishnu, destined to arrive on a white horse, sword blazing, to cleanse the world and reset the cosmic clock. His prophecy isn't just a myth, it's a mirror held up to humanity's deepest fears about collapse and renewal. What's chilling isn't just the imagery, a radiant warrior cutting through corruption, but the eerie parallels to modern existential threats. The Vishnu Purana describes the Kali Yuga's symptoms: rulers becoming tyrants, nature turning against humanity, truth drowned out by noise. Sound familiar? Today's climate disasters, AI reshaping reality, even the erosion of trust in institutions, it's as if the ancients sketched a blueprint for our anxieties. Kalki's arrival hinges on a tipping point when the world becomes unbearable. That threshold feels closer than ever, yet there's a twist. Kalki isn't just destruction, he's purification. His sword severs not just corrupt kings, but the illusions binding humanity. Some scholars argue this isn't about literal apocalypse, but a metaphor for inner awakening, a call to confront our collective shadow before it's too late. Even the horse, long a symbol of momentum, hints at accelerated change. Could Kalki represent not a singular savior, but the cumulative force of human conscience rising to meet crisis? Modern India wrestles with this duality. In temples, Kalki is depicted with futuristic touches, sometimes even holding a glowing weapon resembling a sci-fi ray gun. Entrepreneurs name AI startups after him, while environmental activists invoke his prophecy to demand action. The line between divine intervention and human responsibility blurs. After all, if the Kali Yuga's suffering stems from greed and neglect, doesn't its resolution lie in our hands? Perhaps Kalki's true power isn't in his arrival, but in the warning itself, a reminder that endings are also beginnings, and the future's shape depends on what we choose to see in the mirror of prophecy. Deep in the misty forests of Wales, where the veil between worlds was said to be thin, a figure emerges from legend, one whose prophecies would shape the destiny of a kingdom and the imagination of centuries. Merlin, the half-demon, half-mortal seer, wasn't just a wizard in Arthurian lore. He was a harbinger of fate, weaving visions of glory and ruin with the same ease as casting spells. Geoffrey of Monmouth, the 12th century chronicler who first cemented Merlin in written history, presented him not as a whimsical sorcerer, but as a political prophet, his words manipulated by kings and bishops alike. The most enduring of Merlin's prophecies, the rise of King Arthur, the once and future king who would unite Britain and, according to legend, return in its darkest hour. But here's the twist: Geoffrey's Merlin wasn't spinning fairy tales. His visions were thinly veiled propaganda designed to legitimize the ruling elite. The red dragon triumphing over the white dragon in his prophecies, a coded nod to the Welsh resistance against Saxon invaders, repackaged as divine destiny. Even the famous sword in the stone, a symbol of Arthur's divine right, served a purpose: to convince a fractured nation that unity wasn't just possible but foretold. Yet something extraordinary happened over the centuries. Merlin's politically charged predictions escaped the pages of history and morphed into something far more powerful: myth. The Arthurian legends transformed from medieval spin doctoring into a beacon of hope, a promise that greatness could be reclaimed. The idea of Arthur's return, sleeping beneath Avalon until Britain needed him, wasn't just folklore. It became a cultural lifeline during wars, plagues, and invasions. When Tudor monarchs claimed descent from Arthur to solidify their rule, or when World War I soldiers whispered of seeing the king's ghost in the trenches, they weren't just remembering a story. They were clinging to a prophecy that refused to die. The contrast is striking. In Geoffrey's hands, Merlin was a tool, his prophecies a means to an end. But in the hearts of the people, those same prophecies became something transcendent, a reminder that even in the darkest ages, legends don't fade, they wait. And perhaps that's the real magic of Merlin's visions, not their accuracy, but their ability to convince us that the future isn't just written, it's dreamed. When the clock struck midnight on December 21, 2012, millions held their breath, waiting for the cataclysm the ancient Maya had supposedly predicted. News channels ran doomsday countdowns, survivalists stockpiled supplies, conspiracy theorists warned of planetary alignments hurling Earth into chaos. But as the sun rose on December 22nd, one thing became clear: the world hadn't ended. So what really lay behind the so-called Mayan prophecy, and how did a sacred calendar become twisted into a global panic? The truth starts with the long count calendar, an intricate system the Maya used to track vast cycles of time. Unlike our linear Gregorian calendar, theirs operated in grand rotations, each spanning over 5,000 years. The date everyone fixated on, 2012, simply marked the end of one such cycle, the 13th Byakhton, much like December 31st closes a yearly cycle for us. For the Maya, this wasn't an apocalyptic deadline but a cosmic reset, a moment of renewal akin to the turning of a giant celestial page. Their inscriptions even reference events planned after this date, proving they never saw it as an end. So where did the doomsday myth take root? Blame a perfect storm of mistranslation and pop culture frenzy. In the 1960s, scholars misread the Maya's concept of completion as doom. By the 90s, New Age authors spun this into tales of spiritual awakening or catastrophe, while Hollywood blockbusters like 2012 cranked the fear to absurd heights. The internet then set the wildfire, with viral posts cherry-picking vague connections, solar flares, mythical planet Nibiru, even zombie uprisings, to stitch together a narrative the Maya themselves would have found baffling. Yet beneath the hysteria lies a profound irony. The Maya were unparalleled astronomers, their calendars precise enough to track Venus's orbit within seconds. They saw time as a sacred spiral where endings bred new beginnings. In obsessing over their mistaken apocalypse, modern society missed their real warning, not of sudden destruction, but of humanity's reckless disconnect from cosmic rhythms. Droughts that toppled their cities, wars fueled by greed, these were the true collapses they documented. Their prophecies, it turns out, weren't about predicting the future, but about recognizing the patterns that shape it. Perhaps the most haunting lesson of 2012 isn't about the Maya at all, but about us. In our scramble to find meaning in an ancient calendar, we revealed our own obsession with finality, our hunger for definitive answers in a chaotic world. The real prophecy may be this: civilizations keep repeating the same mistake, confusing the end of an era with the end of everything, when in reality, it's just the universe whispering, "Turn the page." The air in the hall is thick with the scent of burning pine as the Völva, the Norse seeress, raises her gnarled hands. Her voice, cracked with age yet thrumming with terrible authority, begins to chant the verses that will unravel the fate of the gods themselves. This is the Völuspá, the cornerstone of Norse prophecy, a sweeping vision of doom and renewal buried within the poetic Edda. Unlike the cryptic riddles of Delphi or the political machinations of Merlin, the Völva's words are stark, visceral, painting a tableau so vivid it feels less like prediction and more like memory. She speaks of Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods, a cascade of catastrophes both cosmic and intimate. The sun blackens, the earth trembles as the monstrous wolf Fenrir breaks free, his jaws stretching from sky to earth. The sea swallows the land as Jormungandr, the world serpent, writhes in fury. Even Odin, the Allfather, falls to Fenrir's teeth, while Thor succumbs to the serpent's venom after striking it down. The imagery is apocalyptic, yet what's chilling isn't just the destruction. it's the inevitability. The Völva describes these events with the calm certainty of someone watching a saga already written, a scroll unfurling toward its final line. But then the twist: after the fires cool and the waves recede, she whispers of something astonishing, a new world rising from the watery void, green and fresh. Two human survivors, Lif and Lithrasir, emerge from Yggdrasil's roots to repopulate the earth. The gods themselves are reborn, their descendants stepping into the roles of their fallen forebears. Ragnarök isn't an end, it's a cycle, a violent metamorphosis necessary for renewal. Modern ears can't help but hear echoes of our own existential dread in these ancient stanzas. The Völva's description of poisoned skies and raging seas mirrors today's climate collapse narratives. Fenrir's unchecked fury feels eerily like our own failures to rein in greed and exploitation. Even the serpent Jormungandr, said to grow so large it encircles the earth, resembles the feedback loops of environmental decay, where one crisis tightens around another. Yet the Völuspá isn't just doom-mongering. Its deepest power lies in the seers' unshakable faith in rebirth. The Norse didn't fear Ragnarök, they saw it as a cosmic recalibration, a reset button built into the universe. That perspective forces a haunting question: could our own looming catastrophes be framed not as finality, but as a painful transition? The Völva's prophecy suggests that survival isn't about avoiding the storm, but learning to weather it and recognizing what must be left behind so something new can take root. Perhaps that's why Ragnarök still captivates us. It's not the fire and blood that linger in memory, but the quiet after. The image of that untouched earth, waiting for Lif and Lithrasir to begin again, lingers like a challenge. The Völva's message isn't just a warning, it's a dare to see beyond the end and imagine what might grow from the ashes. In the quiet Portuguese village of Fatima, three young shepherds, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta, claimed to witness something extraordinary in the spring of 1917. A radiant woman, bathed in light and calling herself the Lady of the Rosary, appeared to them over 6 months, delivering messages that would ripple through history. These weren't just personal revelations, they were dire prophecies for the world, warnings so explosive that the Catholic Church would guard them like state secrets for decades. The first two prophecies arrived with terrifying clarity. The lady foresaw the end of World War I, but warned that a second, far more devastating conflict would erupt if humanity didn't repent. She spoke of a night illuminated by an unknown light, a sign of the coming storm. Sure enough, in January 1938, an eerie aurora borealis blazed across Europe, visible as far south as Spain and Italy, just months before Hitler annexed Austria. Then came the chilling second prophecy. Russia would spread its errors across the world, causing wars and persecution of the Church unless consecrated to Mary's Immaculate Heart. Skeptics dismissed it until the Iron Curtain descended, cementing Soviet influence over half the globe. But it was the third secret that spawned endless intrigue. Sealed in the Vatican archives until 2000, its contents were rumored to be so apocalyptic that popes hesitated to reveal them. When finally published, the text described a bishop in white climbing a mountain of corpses, only to be struck down by soldiers' bullets, a scene many linked to the assassination attempt on John Paul II in 1981. Yet conspiracy theorists insist the released version was incomplete, pointing to cryptic comments from church insiders about unshared visions of apostasy and collapsing faith. Some even claim the secret hints at a coming schism, a fracture within the church so profound it would shake Catholicism to its core. What makes the Fatima prophecies uniquely unsettling isn't just their accuracy, but their unfinished nature. The lady's final words, a plea for penance and conversion, suggest the future she saw wasn't fixed, but contingent on human choices. In that way, Fatima stands apart from fatalistic predictions. It's less a blueprint of inevitabilities and more a crossroads, a divine alarm bell ringing through time. Whether interpreted as mystical foresight or psychological metaphor, one truth echoes across the decades. The children's visions tapped into a fear deeper than war or political upheaval. They spoke to the dread that humanity, left unchecked, might engineer its own undoing. And in an age of nuclear brinkmanship and algorithmic disinformation, that warning feels less like a relic of the past and more like a mirror held up to our present. In the sun-baked mesas of Arizona, where the sky stretches endless and blue, the Hopi elders have passed down a prophecy for generations, one that speaks not of destruction but of transformation. At its heart is the blue star quatrain, a celestial dancer said to appear in the heavens as a harbinger of great change. Unlike the fiery doom of Ragnarok or the political intrigue of Merlin's visions, this prophecy carries a quieter urgency woven into the cycles of nature and the rhythms of the earth. The elders say when the blue star quatrain dances in the night sky, it will signal the beginning of the end of one world and the birth of another. But here's the twist: this isn't just a story about the future. It's a mirror held up to the present, a reminder that purification isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's a necessary rebirth. The debate over what exactly the blue star quatrain represents has sparked fascination and controversy. Some point to celestial events, comets like Hale-Bopp, which blazed across the sky in 1997, its blue-tinged tail eerily matching the Hopi descriptions. Others go further, suggesting the quatrain could symbolize an extraterrestrial presence, a cosmic messenger arriving to guide humanity through its next evolution. The Hopi themselves have been cautious, emphasizing that the prophecy isn't about literal stars or ships, but about spiritual awakening. The blue star isn't just an object, it's a sign, a wake-up call written in the language of the cosmos. What makes this prophecy so compelling is its duality. On one hand, it warns of upheaval, crops failing, rivers drying, the earth trembling. On the other, it promises renewal, but only if humanity heeds the lessons of balance and respect embedded in Hopi teachings. Modern parallels are impossible to ignore: climate shifts, water scarcity, even the disconnection from natural rhythms that define so much of contemporary life. The Hopi don't see the blue star quatrain as a passive omen. They see it as a challenge, a test of whether we can realign with the wisdom of the earth before it's too late. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of this legend isn't its prediction, but its patience. The Hopi have waited centuries for the blue star's arrival, watching the world rush toward the very crises their ancestors foresaw. And in that waiting lies a profound question. When the sign finally appears, will we recognize it as a warning or as an invitation? The answer might determine not just the fate of one tribe, but of us all. High in the snow-laden peaks of the Himalayas, where the air is so thin it scrapes the lungs, Tibetan monks whisper of a kingdom hidden beyond time, a place called Shambhala. Unlike the fiery doom of Ragnarok or the cryptic riddles of Nostradamus, this prophecy pulses with quiet hope. The ancient Kalachakra texts describe Shambhala as a sanctuary of enlightened warriors, cloaked in mist and mystery, waiting for the moment when greed and corruption plunge the world into darkness. Only then will its king, Rigdon ride forth with an army of light to restore balance. But here's what's fascinating: Shambhala isn't just a refuge. It's a mirror reflecting humanity's deepest yearning for a utopia just out of reach. The legend's roots stretch back over 1,000 years, woven into Buddhist teachings as both a physical place and a spiritual ideal. Some say it lies in the Kunlun Mountains, accessible only through hidden valleys where compasses spin uselessly. Others insist it exists in a parallel dimension, visible only to those who have purged their egos. The Dalai Lama himself has called Shambhala a metaphor for inner peace, yet expeditions from Soviet spies to Nazi occultists have wasted fortunes and lives searching for its gates. Even Hollywood couldn't resist morphing the myth into Shangri-La, a paradise frozen in perpetual harmony. But Shambhala's prophecy carries a warning sharper than any blade. The texts foretell a great cleansing before its emergence, where materialism and deceit collapse under their own weight. Sound familiar? Climate disasters, societal fractures, the chasm between rich and poor, the parallel sting. Tibetan lamas argue this isn't about passive waiting. Shambhala's arrival hinges on collective awakening, a tipping point where enough souls choose compassion over consumption. Modern seekers grapple with this duality. Scientists map glacial caves, hoping to uncover physical clues. Psychologists study the legends hold on our psyche, why the idea of a hidden savior resonates across cultures. Meanwhile, Silicon Valley billionaires fund bunkers and space colonies, perhaps missing the point entirely. Shambhala isn't a bolt hole for the elite. It's a call to rebuild the world before it burns. The most haunting question isn't whether Shambhala exists, but whether we're willing to become the warriors it promises. Because if the prophecy holds any truth, the kingdom won't reveal itself until we stop searching outward and start forging it within. On a blustery November day in 1840, William Henry Harrison stood on the steps of the Capitol, delivering the longest inaugural address in American history without a coat. The 68-year-old president scoffed at the cold, but weeks later he was dead, the first casualty of what would become one of history's strangest political patterns. Harrison's death wasn't just tragedy, it was the spark that ignited a legend, the Curse of Tippecanoe, a 20-year cycle of doom haunting the White House for over a century. The curse's roots stretch back to 1811, to the Battle of Tippecanoe between Native American forces led by Shawnee leader Tecumseh and his brother Tenskwatawa, known as the Prophet against U.S. troops under future President William Henry Harrison. As the story goes, after Harrison's victory, the Prophet placed a curse upon him and all future presidents elected in years ending with 0, declaring they would die in office. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a folktale. Then the bodies started piling up. Harrison's pneumonia in 1841 was just the beginning. Abraham Lincoln, elected in 1860, was assassinated in his second term. James Garfield, elected in 1880, was shot mere months into office. William McKinley, re-elected in 1900, met the same fate. Warren Harding, elected in 1920, died mysteriously during a cross-country trip. Franklin Roosevelt, elected for his third term in 1940, succumbed to illness months before World War II ended. John F. Kennedy, elected in 1960, was gunned down in Dallas. 7 presidents, all elected in 0-year cycles, all dead while serving. The pattern was so uncanny that by the mid-20th century, the curse had seeped into political consciousness. Newspapers printed nervous editorials about Tecumseh's revenge. White House staff whispered about the curse whenever a 0-year election loomed. Then came 1980, and Ronald Reagan, older than any previous president at inauguration, seemed destined to fulfill the prophecy. Just 69 days into his term, John Hinckley Jr. fired 6 shots outside a Washington hotel, one bullet ricocheting off Reagan's limousine and piercing his lung. The president survived, but the close call sent shockwaves through a nation conditioned to expect the worst. Reagan's survival wasn't just luck. Some historians argue the curse was broken by modern medicine, the swift response of Secret Service and trauma teams. Others point to Reagan's own dark humor. He reportedly joked to his wife Nancy after surgery, "Honey, I forgot to duck," echoing the doomed last words of another cursed president, McKinley. But beneath the speculation lies a deeper question. Was the curse ever supernatural to begin with, or did its power come from the sheer weight of expectation? The 0-year phenomenon might have simpler explanations: statistical anomalies, the heightened pressures of election cycles, or even the psychological toll of leadership during turbulent eras. Yet the eerie precision of the pattern lingers in the American imagination, a reminder that history sometimes stitches itself together in ways that defy logic. Tecumseh's curse may have faded, but its legend endures not as a prophecy, but as a testament to how fear, once woven into the fabric of a culture, can shape destiny as surely as any bullet or virus. Embedded in the eastern corner of the Kaaba, the cube-shaped sanctuary at the heart of Islam's holiest site, rests a relic shrouded in divine mystery, the Black Stone of Mecca. To the millions of pilgrims who circle the Kaaba each year, touching or kissing the stone is a sacred act, a physical connection to the divine. But in Islamic eschatology, this same stone holds a far more ominous role, one that unfolds at the end of time itself. The prophecies are chilling. Hadith sayings of the Prophet Muhammad describe the black stone as a silent witness to centuries of human devotion and sin. When the final days arrive, it will suddenly speak, testifying before Allah about every hand that ever touched it in sincerity or hypocrisy. Imagine that moment, a stone older than recorded history, entrusted with the collective memory of billions, finally breaking its silence to deliver a verdict on humanity's spiritual legacy. What makes this prophecy so unsettling isn't just its drama, but its scientific curiosity. The black stone's origins have long been debated. Some scholars suggest it's a meteorite, its glossy black surface scarred by millennia of exposure and reverence. If true, the implications are staggering. A celestial object hurled from the cosmos, serving as both a focal point of worship and a future accuser. Others argue it's volcanic rock or even agate, but its unusual texture and resilience fuel the meteorite theory. The stone's symbolic weight transcends its composition. It's said to have descended from paradise pure white, only to blacken under the stain of human sin, a visual metaphor for humanity's fall from grace. Yet even in its darkened state, it remains a compass point for prayer, a reminder that redemption is always within reach. Modern Muslims grapple with this duality. For some, the end times prophecy is literal, a divine audit foretold in vivid detail. Others see it as allegory, a warning that our actions, no matter how private, ripple through time and space. The stone's silent presence becomes a mirror. Are we living in a way that, if it could speak, would make us proud? Perhaps the true power of the black stone's legend lies in its ambiguity. It doesn't predict annihilation, but accountability. The stone isn't a passive omen, it's a catalyst forcing us to confront the weight of every choice, every prayer, every moment of false piety. In an age of fleeting digital footprints and moral gray areas, that's a prophecy more resonant than ever, a celestial judge waiting patiently for its day in court. The air in Tarquin's palace was thick with the scent of burning herbs when the old woman arrived, cloaked in tattered robes, her eyes clouded yet piercing. She carried a bundle wrapped in linen, clutched to her chest like a dying child. The Sibyl of Cumae, they called her, a prophetess who had already outlived generations. King Tarquin the Proud barely glanced up from his wine as she unfolded her offer. 9 books of prophecy, each containing the unspoken fate of Rome. The price: 300 pieces of gold, a king's ransom. Tarquin laughed. What use were scribbles of mystics when his armies could shape destiny? The Sibyl didn't plead. Instead, she turned and tossed 3 books into the brazier. Flames licked the parchment, twisting the words into smoke before the king could protest. The price remains, she said, her voice like wind through ruins. When he hesitated again, 3 more volumes followed, their ashes floating upward like ghostly omens. Only then did Tarquin's arrogance crack. He paid the original sum for the final 3, sealing Rome's dependence on fragments of foresight. Those surviving books became the Sibylline texts, guarded in a vault beneath Jupiter's temple, consulted only in moments of existential crisis. When Hannibal's elephants crossed the Alps, when plague emptied the streets, priests would unroll the brittle pages, searching for divine instruction, sacrifices to forgotten gods, temples to be raised overnight, even the bizarre ritual of burying Greek couples alive to appease the underworld. The prophecies worked, or so Rome believed, yet one question lingered: what wisdom turned to cinder in those first 6 books? historians have obsessed over the lost verses for centuries. Some speculate they contained cures for diseases Rome hadn't yet faced, or warnings about emperors who would later gut the Republic. Others whisper of a darker possibility, that the Sibyl's full prophecy outlined not just Rome's rise but its fall, and the burning was deliberate. Perhaps she knew humanity couldn't handle the full weight of its destiny. The irony stings. The very act of destruction bound Rome to the fragments it saved, making the city a slave to incomplete knowledge. And in that paradox lies the Sibyl's true lesson. Prophecies aren't just predictions. They're negotiations, bargains struck between what we're willing to know and what we'd rather leave in the fire. Long before messiahs walked the pages of the Bible or Quran, a radiant figure emerged from the fire-lit temples of ancient Persia, the Saoshyant, Zoroastrianism's promised savior. This wasn't just a myth, it was a cosmic blueprint, a vision of redemption so vivid it would echo through millennia, shaping the very foundations of Judeo-Christian thought. The prophecies whisper of a time when this divine warrior, born of a virgin and the seed of the prophet Zoroaster himself, will descend upon a world drowning in chaos. His arrival won't just bring peace, it will rewrite reality. According to the Zoroastrian sacred texts, the Avesta, the Saoshyant's coming will trigger a cataclysm unlike any other. Mountains of molten metal will rise, forming a river of fire that engulfs the earth. But this isn't mere destruction, it's purification. Every soul, living or dead, will be forced to wade through that blazing current. For the righteous, it will feel like warm milk. For the wicked, agony beyond imagining. Then comes the miracle. The dead will stir in their graves, their bones knitting back together as the Saoshyant resurrects all of humanity for a final judgment. Imagine that moment, every person who ever lived standing together under the same fiery sky, their deeds weighed in a celestial balance. The parallels to later Abrahamic traditions are unmistakable. The Saoshyant's virgin birth predates Christian narratives by centuries. His role as judge of the living and the dead mirrors the Messiah and the Islamic Mahdi. Even the river of fire finds its counterpart in biblical descriptions of Armageddon. Historians argue this isn't coincidence. Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest monotheistic faiths, deeply influenced exiled Jewish communities in Babylon, who later carried these themes back to Jerusalem. The Saoshyant's DNA pulses through the book of Daniel's Son of Man and Revelation's triumphant Christ, yet what sets the Saoshyant apart is his ultimate purpose. This isn't just about punishment or reward, it's about cosmic housekeeping. After the great cleansing, the Saoshyant will preside over a perfected world where evil is annihilated and even Ahriman, the devil himself, is rendered powerless. Time itself will reset, and humanity will live in a state of divine harmony, free from want, war, or corruption. It's a vision so hopeful, so audacious, that it begs the question, did Zoroastrianism invent the idea of a happy ending? Modern Zoroastrians, though few in number, still cling to this prophecy's transformative power. In Mumbai's fire temples and diaspora communities worldwide, they keep alive the belief that the Saoshyant will come not as a conqueror, but as a surgeon, cutting away the rot to reveal the world as it was always meant to be. And in an age of climate crisis and global unrest, that ancient promise carries new weight. The Saoshyant story isn't just a relic, it's a challenge, a reminder that renewal often walks hand in hand with fire. When the wind howls through the hollows of Ireland at night, there's a sound, older than castles, sharper than steel, that still freezes the blood of those who hear it. The Banshee's wail isn't just a ghost story. It's a funeral dirge woven into the DNA of Celtic families, a harbinger of death so precise it's been documented for centuries. Picture this, a spectral woman draped in grey, her face hidden by long, tangled hair, kneeling by a riverbank to scrub the blood-stained clothes of those about to die. Her scream tears through the silence, a sound said to shatter glass and stop hearts mid-beat. But here's what chills historians, these aren't just campfire tales. The Banshee's cries are tied to specific bloodlines: the O'Neills, the O'Briens, the McCarthys, with records stretching back to medieval annals. Take the O'Neill dynasty, rulers of Ulster for generations. Chronicles from the 1500s describe how, before the death of Shane O'Neill, a warlord feared even by the English servants reported hearing unearthly wailing near the family's stronghold at Dungannon. Days later, Shane lay dead, betrayed and butchered by rivals. Fast forward to 1893, when a traveling physician in County Kerry wrote of being summoned to a wealthy home after the lady of the house heard the Banshee's cry. By dawn, her eldest son had drowned in a shallow creek, his body found exactly where the scream seemed loudest. Modern encounters are no less eerie. In 2005, a farmer in County Clare called emergency services, convinced a woman was being murdered in his fields. Officers found nothing, no footprints, no signs of struggle, until the man's uncle died of a stroke that same night. Even tech hasn't silenced the legend. Urban explorers recording in abandoned Irish estates often capture audio glitches, screams with no visible source, frequencies that spike on devices but vanish when played back. Skeptics dismiss it as infrasound or auditory pareidolia, but believers point to something older, a covenant between the spirit world and certain families, a warning system etched into the land itself. The Banshee's power lies in her specificity. Unlike omens that cast wide nets of doom, she targets only those with ancient Gaelic blood, her voice a parting gift from the otherworld to those who still remember its language. But in an age of diaspora, where descendants of those clans are scattered across continents, the question lingers: does the Banshee follow the blood, or is her cry bound to the misty hills of Ireland? Either way, her legend endures not just as folklore, but as a whispered reminder that some ties, even in death, refuse to be broken. On the windswept moors of 17th century Scotland, where the boundary between this world and the next was said to blur, strode a figure whose visions would etch themselves into the nation's bones. Known as Coinage Odhar, the Brahman seer, this humble laborer turned prophet left a trail of predictions so precise they still send shivers down modern spines. Gifted with a small blue stone that supposedly granted him second sight, Odhar's prophecies ranged from the mundane to the apocalyptic, each delivered with a casual certainty that made them impossible to ignore. Take the Caledonian Canal slicing through the highlands today. Just as he described, ships will sail round the back of Tomnahurich Hill, he declared, pointing to a spot where no water flowed. 200 years later, engineers would blast through that very rock to create the canal, ships gliding where the seer's finger had once pointed. Then there's his eerie forecast of a black rain, poisoning the land before a final battle at a place called Drumossie Moor. Centuries later, that moor would be renamed Culloden, where the Jacobite rebellion collapsed in a storm of blood and musket smoke, its survivors hunted like animals through the heather. The parallels are too exact to dismiss as coincidence, but Odhar's greatest prophecy, and the one that sealed his fate, was his vision of doom for the mighty Seaforth clan. After angering Lady Seaforth by exposing her husband's infidelity during a feast, the seer spat out a curse. The clan's heirs would grow deaf and dumb, their line ending in sorrow. The nobles, enraged, sentenced him to death by an unthinkable method: immersion in a barrel of molten lead. Legend claims that as the metal swallowed him, Odhar laughed, predicting a stranger on horseback would save him. None came, yet his final words haunted the executioners. The Seaforths would indeed wither, their legacy crumbling just as he'd foretold. Historians still wrestle with the Brahman seer's legacy. Was he a genuine mystic, or simply a sharp observer who read the political currents of his time? The molten lead execution feels almost mythic, a detail too dramatic to be real, yet local records confirm that such brutal punishments were used for witchcraft in that era. Even skeptics can't explain how his canal prediction matched reality down to the topography. perhaps the most haunting question isn't whether Odhar saw the future, but why his prophecies resonate so deeply today. In an age of climate crisis and social fracture, his warnings about black rains and fractured kingdoms feel uncomfortably familiar. The Brahman seer didn't just predict events, he captured the cyclical nature of human folly, the way history's wheels keep turning through the same ruts. His story lingers not because it's supernatural, but because it's human, a reminder that the darkest prophecies often spring from the soil of our own choices, waiting for time to prove them right. Deep in the misty hollows of the Appalachian Mountains, where the rivers sing ancient songs and the trees whisper secrets, the Cherokee people tell of beings no taller than a man's knee, the Unweitsunste, the little people. These elusive spirits, hidden in the folds of the forest, are more than just folklore. They're messengers, their warnings etched into tribal memory long before European ships darkened the horizon. According to elders, these tiny beings didn't just play tricks or guard hidden caves, they wept. They wept for the future they saw coming, for the sickness and sorrow that would ride in on the winds of change. One haunting story recounts how, generations before contact, the little people appeared to a group of children playing by a riverbank. They spoke in hushed tones of hollow men, pale figures who would arrive in floating houses, bringing fire and chains. The children ran to their village, repeating the warning, but the adults dismissed it as childish fancy until the day the first European explorers emerged from the woods, their metal armor glinting like the scales of unnatural fish. The prophecy had been precise, yet unheeded, but the little people's visions didn't stop at colonization. Elders say they also foretold ecological collapse, rivers choked with sludge, forests felled in a single generation, animals vanishing as if swallowed by the earth. In one chilling account recorded by ethnologist James Mooney in the late 1800s, a Cherokee healer described a dream shared by multiple shamans, the little people standing atop a barren mountain, holding bundles of withered plants, their tiny hands outstretched in grief. When the rivers burn and the four-leggeds forget their paths, they whispered, "The circle will be broken." Modern Cherokee scholars see these stories not as literal predictions, but as coded wisdom, a deep understanding of cause and effect woven into myth. The Hollow Men weren't just Europeans, they symbolized greed, the emptiness of exploitation. The poisoned rivers and vanishing animals, a stark warning about sustainability, framed in terms their descendants would remember. Today, as climate change reshapes the Appalachians and invasive species disrupt ancient ecosystems, the little people's prophecies feel less like legend and more like a blueprint for survival. What's most striking is the duality of their message. The little people were never vengeful. Even in their direst warnings, they offered glimpses of redemption if humans relearned balance, if they listened to the land as the Cherokee once did. Perhaps that's why these stories persist. They're not just echoes of the past, they're a compass pointing toward a future where prophecy doesn't have to be fate. In the quiet scriptorium of an Irish monastery around the year 1139, a man named Malachi, or more later Saint Malachi, penned a vision so precise it would haunt the Vatican for nearly 1,000 years. According to tradition, after a pilgrimage to Rome, the archbishop received a divine revelation, a list of 112 cryptic Latin phrases, each corresponding to a future pope, stretching from his own time to the very end of the Catholic Church. These weren't just vague predictions, they were razor-sharp identifiers, nicknaming each pontiff with eerie accuracy. Take Pillars of the Earth, describing Pope Pius III, whose family crest featured towering columns. Or From the Midst of the Moon, fitting Giovanni Battista Montini, Paul VI, born in a town whose name literally means Moon City. The most spine-tingling came in 1978 with Albino Luciani, John Paul I, whose 33-day reign matched Malachi's label of the half-moon. Even non-Catholic historians pause at these details, but it's the final prophecy that ignites debate. Peter the Roman, the last pope on Malachy's list, who would allegedly reign during a period of persecution before Rome's destruction. Some claim this points to Pope Francis, the first Jesuit pope, an order historically called the foot soldiers of the papacy, whose humility and reforms mirror early Christian ideals. Others argue the true Peter the Roman hasn't yet appeared, that Francis is merely the 111th, and the end game remains ahead. The Vatican dismisses the prophecies as medieval forgeries, likely penned in the 1500s to influence papal elections. Yet the precision lingers, forcing questions. If these are fakes, why do they fit so unnervingly well? And if they're real, what does that mean for a church already grappling with scandal and secularization? Perhaps Malachy's true power isn't in predicting popes, but in spotlighting humanity's obsession with endings. Every generation sees itself in his final lines, convinced it's living in the last act. Whether divine or delusional, the prophecies endure not as a countdown to doom, but as a mirror held up to our deepest fear, that even institutions built to outlast empires might one day crumble, leaving only whispers of what was foretold. The oracle's chamber was thick with smoke when the Athenian ambassadors stumbled in, their city trembling on the brink of annihilation. The Persian war machine, led by the ruthless Xerxes, had already torched northern Greece, its endless columns now marching south to crush Athens. Desperate, the city's leaders begged the Pythia for guidance. Her reply was a riddle wrapped in doom: flee to the ends of the earth or prepare for utter destruction. Yet a wall of wood alone shall be uncaptured, a boon to you and your children. Panic erupted in the assembly. Some argued the prophecy demanded retreat, interpreting the wall of wood as the barricades around the Acropolis. Others wailed that resistance was futile, until a sharp-eyed general named Themistocles seized the moment. The wooden wall wasn't a barrier of timber, he insisted. It was Athens' fleet, her sleek triremes waiting in the harbor. The oracle's words weren't a death sentence, they were a battle plan disguised as poetry. What followed was one of history's most audacious bluffs. Themistocles evacuated Athens, convincing its citizens to abandon their homes and take refuge on the island of Salamis. Meanwhile, he lured the Persian navy into the narrow straits where their numbers meant nothing. The Greeks, outmanned but undaunted, used their smaller, nimbler ships to carve the Persian fleet into splinters. By nightfall, Xerxes' throne had been dragged to the shore so he could watch his dreams of conquest sink beneath the waves. But here's the twist: the prophecy didn't save Athens, Themistocles did. The oracle's words were vague enough to justify surrender or flight, yet he spun them into a call to arms. This wasn't blind faith in fate, it was a masterclass in bending prophecy to human will. Later historians would note the irony: the same wall of wood that saved Greece could have doomed it if read differently. The lesson: prophecies are clay molded by those desperate or cunning enough to shape them. Modern strategists still study Salamis as a case study in leadership under existential threat. Themistocles didn't just interpret the oracle, he weaponized her ambiguity, turning cryptic verse into naval doctrine. His genius lay in recognizing that divine messages aren't fixed blueprints, they're prompts, demanding ingenuity as much as reverence. The wooden walls didn't protect Athens because they were foretold. They triumphed because one man dared to redefine their meaning. Perhaps that's the real riddle at Delphi's heart. The gods may whisper the future, but it's mortals who must choose whether to cower before it or build ships. In the dim candlelight of 4th century Rome, where the old gods still whispered in the marble halls, a new faith was quietly stealing fire from their temples. Among the most startling victims of this spiritual heist was the Arthurian Sibyl, a pagan oracle whose visions would be ripped from their roots and grafted onto Christian prophecy with breathtaking audacity. Long before Michelangelo immortalized her beside Hebrew prophets on the Sistine Chapel ceiling, this Greek seeress was just another voice in the polytheistic chorus, her cryptic verses preserved on crumbling scrolls. But as Christianity rose, her words underwent a transformation more radical than any resurrection story. They were baptized. Take her most famous prediction, originally sung to the rhythm of raindrops on Apollo's temple steps. A king will come, crowned not in gold but thorns, his hands pierced, his body broken for many. To pagan ears, this might have evoked any number of dying and rising gods: Osiris, Dionysus, Attis. But Christian scribes pounced, declaring it a clear foretelling of Christ's crucifixion centuries before the fact. Never mind that the Sibyl's original text referred to a sacrificial bull in the next line. Inconvenient details were scrubbed away like incense soot from a repurposed church wall. Michelangelo's frescoes tell the tale without words. There she sits, the Arthurian Sibyl, her muscular frame twisting toward the light of Genesis, her scroll unfurled alongside Isaiah and Jeremiah. The message was undeniable. Even pagan oracles had bowed before the coming Messiah. This wasn't just art, it was theological warfare, a claim that all truth, no matter its origin, flowed toward Christianity. The irony, the very church that canonized her predictions had burned countless heretics for dabbling in pagan wisdom. Scholars still debate whether this was pious fraud or genuine belief. Some argue early Christians, hungry for legitimacy in a skeptical empire, ransacked pagan texts for prophecies like sailors stripping a shipwreck. Others suggest a subtler alchemy. As converts moved between faiths, they genuinely reinterpreted familiar oracles through new lenses. The Sibyl's words became a palimpsest pagan parchment scraped clean and rewritten with holy ink. What's undeniable is the enduring power of this stolen prophecy. From Dante's Divine Comedy to Handel's Messiah, the Sibyl's repurposed voice echoes through Western art, a ghostly duet between the old world and the new. Her story forces a haunting question. How many other ancient truths have been pressed into service for causes their authors never imagined? The answer might lie in the shadows of every cathedral, where pagan pillars still hold up Christian vaults, silent witnesses to the endless repurposing of prophecy. The Aztecs didn't count time in years, they measured it in suns, each one a world age destined to end in catastrophe. According to their sacred texts, 4 suns had already risen and fallen before theirs, each destroyed by monstrous forces: jaguars, hurricanes, volcanic fire, and floods. Now they lived under the 5th sun, the era of movement, symbolized by the trembling earth and ruled by Tunatia, the sun god who demanded blood to keep the cosmos alive. But legend whispered this age too had an expiration date, and its final act would be written in the year 1 read, when the exiled feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl would return from the east to reclaim his throne. When Spanish galleons appeared off the coast of Mexico in 1519, their sails billowing like white wings against the horizon, the Aztec Emperor Moctezuma froze. The year was Ciacatl 1 read. The strangers wore metal that gleamed like serpent scales, and their leader, Hernan Cortés, arrived on the very day the calendar foretold Quetzalcoatl's return. To Moctezuma, this couldn't be coincidence. Was it divine homecoming or cosmic trickery? His hesitation cost him everything. Within 2 years, Tenochtitlan, the gleaming Venice of the Americas, lay in ruins, its temples shattered, its canals choked with corpses. The prophecy had fulfilled itself, but not as the Aztecs imagined. Modern scholars dissect this collision of myth and history like a forensic puzzle. The Spanish, of course, knew nothing of Quetzalcoatl's legend, yet their timing was so uncanny it stumps historians to this day. Some argue Moctezuma's paralysis wasn't mere superstition. It was the weight of 1,000 years of celestial math bearing down on a single moment. The Aztec calendar didn't just predict time, it shaped reality, bending decisions to its rhythm. Others counter that Cortés exploited existing fractures, capitalizing on prophecies the way all conquerors do, as psychological warfare. Yet the 5th sun's prophecy didn't die with Tenochtitlan. It smolders in contemporary fears: climate collapse, pandemics, the looming sense that our age, like the Aztecs, is racing toward a reckoning. Their end of an era wasn't just about destruction, it was about transformation, the necessary death of one world to birth another. Climate activists today invoke the fifth sun not as doom but as a warning. Civilizations don't end because the gods decree it. They end when they forget how to change. Perhaps that's the real lesson coiled inside Quetzalcoatl's myth. The feathered serpent wasn't just a god of wind and wisdom. He was a shapeshifter embodying the fluidity needed to survive time's cycles. The Aztecs saw his return as an ending, but maybe, just maybe, it was an invitation to shed old skins, to meet the future not with resignation but with wings. Some prophecies don't fade, they slumber, waiting for the moment when hope seems lost to stir again. Across cultures and centuries, a peculiar pattern emerges. The legend of the sleeping hero, the king or warrior who hasn't died but rests in some hidden sanctuary, ready to rise when his people need him most. King Arthur, Emperor Barbarossa, and Bran the Blessed, three figures separated by geography and time, yet bound by the same eerie promise. Each represents a nation's deepest yearning, not just for salvation, but for the belief that greatness once lost can return. Take Arthur, the once and future king of Britain. Mortally wounded at Camlan, he was whisked away to Avalon, an isle veiled in mist where he sleeps beneath the hills. The legends insist he'll awaken when Britain faces its gravest peril, his sword Excalibur flashing once more in defiance of tyranny. This isn't just a fairy tale, it's psychological armor. When the Nazis bombed London during the Blitz, whispers circulated that Arthur's ghost had been seen marching along the cliffs of Dover. Whether true or not, the story served its purpose, a reminder that resilience is woven into the land itself. Then there's Barbarossa, the red-bearded Holy Roman Emperor who drowned in a river during the Crusades, or so his enemies thought. German folklore claims he slumbers beneath Kifjusa mountain, his beard growing ever longer as it coils around a table. When it completes its third loop, he'll rise to restore the Reich to glory. The Nazis shamelessly hijacked this myth, twisting it into propaganda for their imperial ambitions. Yet the original prophecy carries a different weight. It speaks not of conquest, but of restoration, a return to unity after fragmentation. The tragedy lies in how easily such symbols can be corrupted. Wales offers a darker variation with Bran the Blessed, the giant king whose severed head was buried beneath the Tower of London, facing France to ward off invasion. Celtic lore promises that as long as the head remains undisturbed, Britain will stand unbroken. But here's the twist: Bran isn't sleeping, he's watching. His myth blurs the line between protector and omen, suggesting that some guardianship comes at a price. Remove the head, the legends warn, and the land will drown in blood. What unites these stories isn't just the motif of dormant heroes, but the tension they embody between hope and hubris, between the desire for a savior and the danger of blind faith. Arthur's return is longed for. Barbarossa's awakening is feared as much as anticipated. Bran's vigilance is a silent bargain with the land itself. These legends thrive in times of upheaval because they offer a paradox, the promise that the past isn't truly gone, and the warning that relying on it too heavily might doom the future. Perhaps the real power of the sleeping hero isn't in his eventual return, but in what his absence makes us confront. Without Arthur, Britons must ask, what does it mean to be the promise you're waiting for? Without Barbarossa, Germans grapple with the cost of nostalgia for lost empires, and Bran's silent gaze forces a chilling question. Are we the guardians of our own legends, or are we the ones who might dig them up too soon? The prophecies whisper, but the choice to listen or to wake what sleeps has always been ours. In the shadowed alleyways of 13th century Europe, a new legend slithered into existence, one that would poison imaginations for centuries. The tale spoke of a shoemaker named Ahasuerus who stood at his doorway in Jerusalem as Jesus stumbled past, carrying the cross to Golgotha. When the exhausted Christ paused to rest, the shoemaker allegedly struck him and mocked, "Walk faster." In response, Jesus fixed him with a gaze that transcended time and uttered the curse, "Thou shalt wander till I return." From that moment, Ahasuerus became the wandering Jew, doomed to walk the earth without rest until the second coming. What began as a cautionary folktale about compassion soon twisted into something darker. By the Renaissance, the wandering Jew had morphed into a spectral figure spotted from Armenia to Hamburg, always an old man with a long beard, his feet bloody, his eyes haunted by centuries of grief. Crowds whispered of encounters, a mysterious stranger who spoke archaic languages, who vanished when asked his name, who predicted plagues and wars with terrifying accuracy. But with each retelling, the legend absorbed the prejudices of its time. The shoemaker became a symbol of Jewish obstinacy, his eternal punishment framed as divine proof of Jewish guilt for Christ's death. The distortion reached its vilest form in Nazi propaganda, where the wandering Jew was recast as a hook-nosed caricature. His endless wandering blamed not on Roman oppression but on intrinsic Jewish rootlessness. This wasn't just slander, it was theological arson, using a twisted version of a medieval tale to justify genocide. Historians trace how the Nazis weaponized the legend, plastering images of the wandering Jew on posters alongside slogans branding Jews as eternal parasites. The irony chills. A story originally about one man's cruelty was perverted to sanction cruelty against millions. Yet the wandering Jew's legacy isn't solely one of hate. Some modern artists and writers have reclaimed the figure, transforming him from a cursed villain into a tragic witness. In songwriter Leonard Cohen's haunting lyrics, the Jew becomes a symbol of exile shared by all displaced peoples. Novelists like Stephen Haim cast him as an immortal chronicler of human folly, his endless walk a mirror to history's cycles of persecution. Even scientific circles borrowed the motif. 19th-century biologists nicknamed the genus Tradescantia the wandering Jew for its invasive resilience, though many now reject the term for its loaded history. The real horror of this legend isn't its supernatural curse, but how effortlessly it reveals humanity's capacity to warp stories into weapons. The wandering Jew began as a parable about repentance, became a tool of anti-Semitism, and now sparks debates about cultural reclamation. His endless path mirrors our own struggle to confront the myths we inherit and decide whether to carry their weight or finally lay them down. Etched into the weathered stone of an 18th-century English garden monument, 8 cryptic letters defy centuries of decoding our svav. This is the Shugborough inscription, carved beneath a mirror image replica of Nicholas Powson's mysterious painting The Shepherds of Arcadia, which famously depicts a tomb bearing the phrase, Et in Arcadia ego. But here's where the mystery deepens. Powson's work has long been linked to Grail lore and the shadowy Priory of Sion, a secret society said to guard earth-shattering religious secrets. Some believe the Shugborough Code isn't just a riddle, it's a ticking clock, pointing to the year 2028 as the moment when a messianic figure, perhaps even a descendant of Christ himself, will step onto the world stage. Theories about the inscription range from the scholarly to the fantastical. One camp argues it's a private love letter, an acronym for the Latin Optimi uxoris optimi sororis vidus amantissimus vovit virtutibus, best of wives, best of sisters, a most devoted widower vows to your virtues. This would tie it to George Anson, the estate's owner, who commissioned the monument after his wife's death, but others hear a more thrilling whisper in those letters. Cryptographers note that if you take the second letter of each word in the nearby shepherd's memorial, out your own sweet veil, Alicia, vanishes vanity, you get our svav. Coincidence or a breadcrumb trail left by the Priory of Sion, who some claim embedded clues about a hidden bloodline in art and architecture. Then there's the Powson connection. The original painting hangs in the Louvre, but its Shugborough replica is flipped horizontally, a detail that screams intentionality to conspiracy theorists. The Shepherds of Arcadia shows figures gathered around a tomb in a landscape eerily resembling the countryside near Rennes-le-Château, the French village at the heart of Holy Blood, Holy Grail lore. Authors of that controversial book claimed Poussin was a priory grandmaster who hid maps to Christ's lineage in his brushstrokes. Now, fringe researchers insist the reversed painting, combined with the inscription, forms a cipher pointing to 2028 as the year the true king will emerge. But why that year? Dig into numerology and the clues multiply. The inscription sits on the Shepherd's Monument, commissioned in 1748. Add 280 years, a sacred number in Masonic tradition, and you land squarely on 2028. Even more unnerving, some interpretations of the Book of Revelation suggest this decade could herald messianic revelations. Mainstream scholars roll their eyes, but the persistence of the theory reveals something profound. In an age of uncertainty, the idea of a hidden countdown to redemption is irresistible. The Shugborough inscription's power lies in its ambiguity. It could be a grieving husband's tribute, an elaborate inside joke, or a key to the greatest secret in history. Until someone cracks it conclusively, those 8 letters will keep taunting us, not just as a puzzle, but as a mirror. Do we see patterns because they're there, or because we desperately need them to be? The answer might determine whether 2028 brings revelation or just another layer to the mystery. Paris, 1783, a city teeming with whispers of revolution, where every salon and back alley hummed with secret societies and simmering outrage. Into this powder keg strode a man wrapped in velvet mystery, Count Alessandro di Cagliostro, self-proclaimed alchemist, healer, and confidant to kings. With his piercing gaze and a flair for the dramatic, he held court in the dimly lit parlors of the aristocracy, spinning tales of ancient Egyptian rites and lost Masonic wisdom. But his most audacious claim wasn't about turning lead into gold, it was about the future. In hushed tones, he foretold the fall of the Bastille years before it happened, detailing its crumbling stones and the blood that would stain them. To some, Cagliostro was a visionary, plugged into the hidden currents of fate through his connections to European Freemasonry. The Masons, after all, were more than just a fraternity. They were a sprawling intelligence network, their lodges buzzing with political dissent and Enlightenment ideals. Through these channels, Cagliostro might have pieced together the coming storm, but to others he was a charlatan, recycling revolutionary rumors and dressing them up as divine revelation. His prophecy wasn't pulled from the ether, it was stitched together from the same grievances muttered in cafes and printed in underground pamphlets. Yet here's the twist: whether by luck or cunning, his prediction landed with terrifying precision. On July 14, 1789, the Bastille, a symbol of royal tyranny, fell to a raging mob. The details Cagliostro had allegedly shared years earlier, down to the severed heads on pikes, unfolded in grotesque reality. Even his critics froze at the uncanny accuracy. Had he truly seen the future, or had he simply understood the inevitability of revolt in a France buckling under inequality? The answer lies in Cagliostro's greatest trick: ambiguity. Like Nostradamus, he spoke in riddles that could bend to fit events after the fact. His prophecies were often retrofitted, edited by followers to seem more precise than they'd been. And yet, his influence was undeniable. Revolutionaries cited him as proof their cause was destined. The paranoid aristocracy saw his foresight as evidence of a Masonic conspiracy. In the end, Cagliostro's real power wasn't in predicting the revolution, it was in helping to will it into being, one whispered prophecy at a time. But fate has a way of circling back. The same revolution he'd foreseen turned on him. Accused of fraud and heresy, Cagliostro died in a papal prison, his name dragged through the mud. His legacy, though, outlasted him. The Bastille prophecy became a blueprint for how prophecy and politics intertwine, how the right words at the right moment can ignite a fire, whether they're divinely inspired or brilliantly calculated. In a world hungry for signs, sometimes the most dangerous prophecies aren't the ones that come true, but the ones people believe enough to make true. Beneath the gnarled roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree, three shadowy figures bend over a shimmering loom that stretches into infinity. Their fingers calloused ancient pluck at glowing threads as they weave the tapestry of existence itself. These are the Norns, Norse mythology's weavers of fate, Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld, whose names whisper of what was, what is, and what shall be. Each strand they spin is a life, a battle, a kingdom's rise or fall, threaded inexorably into the grand design. But here's where their power chills the bone. Unlike the Olympian gods who play with mortals like pieces on a board, the Norns don't just observe destiny, they create it. Every knot, every twist in their web is a force even Odin cannot undo. Compare this to the Greek Moirai, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos, who also spin, measure, and cut the threads of life. On the surface, they seem identical. Three women, one loom, the same relentless march toward inevitability. But dig deeper, and a crucial difference emerges. The Moirai's threads are fixed, their scissors absolute. When Atropos snips, there's no appeal, no unraveling. The Norns, however, leave room for ambiguity. Their web isn't static, it breathes. In one Eddic poem, they carve runes into wood, staining them with ink made from the well of Urd itself. An act that suggests fate isn't just recorded, but written in real time. This duality raises a haunting question. Is destiny a sealed scroll or a manuscript with blank spaces between the lines? The Norns' own names hint at fluidity. Skuld, meaning debt or future, carries the weight of what must be, but also what could be, obligations not yet fulfilled, choices not yet made. Even their loom's location is telling. Yggdrasil's roots drink from three wells, one of wisdom, one of frost, and Urd's well where the Norns sit. Knowledge and time swirl together here, suggesting fate is less a prison and more a river, its course shaped by the terrain but never entirely predictable. The Norse weren't alone in wrestling with this tension. The Moirai's scissors represent fate as a decree, while the Norns' ever-growing web implies collaboration between destiny and free will. Consider the death of Balder, Odin's beloved son. Despite knowing his fate through prophecy, the gods tried desperately to prevent it, binding every creature in creation with oaths not to harm him. Their efforts fail not because the Norns' web is unchangeable, but because they overlook the mistletoe, a thread already woven in. The lesson: you can resist destiny but never outsmart it. Modern minds might dismiss these myths as primitive attempts to explain life's chaos, but their echoes linger. Quantum physics whispers of probability waves, where particles exist in all possible states until observed. The Norns' web, with its infinite potential paths, feels eerily similar. Even psychology nods to this duality, our lives shaped by both genetic fate and the choices that alter its expression. The Norns didn't just predict the future, they embroidered it, leaving room for the unexpected stitch, the frayed edge that unravels in surprising ways. Perhaps that's why their legend endures. In a world of algorithms predicting our every click, the Norns remind us that destiny isn't a straight line. It's a tapestry, vast and interconnected, where every pull of the thread changes the pattern. The Greeks saw fate as a sentence, the Norse saw it as a story, and in that difference lies the most human hope of all, that even if we can't cut the threads that bind us, we might still weave them into something beautiful. Hidden in the sacred treasury of Axum, Ethiopia, under the watchful eyes of monks sworn to secrecy, lies an artifact believed to hold the very power of God, the Ark of the Covenant. But according to the Kebra Nagast, Ethiopia's ancient epic of kings and divinity, this golden chest isn't just a relic of the past, it's a ticking spiritual time bomb, destined to ignite a global reckoning in our lifetime. This 700-year-old text doesn't just recount how the Ark came to Ethiopia with King Solomon's son. It warns of a coming age when its secrets will split the world in two. pitting nations and faiths against each other in a battle for divine truth. The prophecy hinges on a startling claim: the Ark was never meant to stay hidden. The Kebra Nagast describes a future moment vague yet ominously modern, when the glory of Zion will be revealed to all, forcing humanity to confront its stolen legacy. Ethiopian tradition interprets this as the Ark's eventual return to Jerusalem, an event so destabilizing it could unravel the foundations of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Imagine the shockwaves if science were to confirm Ethiopia's claim, undermining centuries of Western assumptions about the Ark's fate. Would the Vatican acknowledge it? Would Israel demand its return? The text suggests this confrontation isn't just possible, it's inevitable. Fueling the fire are whispers of the Ark's rumored power. The Kebra Nagast recounts how it leveled armies, summoned plagues, and even killed those who touched it without sanctity. But its most explosive passage describes the Ark as a key to hidden knowledge, a vessel containing not just stone tablets, but celestial maps and divine sciences lost to time. Conspiracy theorists pounce on this, linking it to everything from ancient alien technology to suppressed energy sources. Modern Ethiopian clergy dismiss such speculation, yet they don't deny the Ark's potential to disrupt. During the 2015 drought, Aksum's priests publicly prayed before the Ark without unveiling it, and within weeks rains drenched the region. Coincidence? Or a glimpse of what might happen if its full power were unlocked? The Kebra Nagast's urgency feels eerily timed. Ethiopia's recent construction of a grand new chapel near Aksum, allegedly to house the Ark more securely, has sparked rumors that the prophecy is nearing fruition. Meanwhile, satellite imagery reveals heightened security around the site, with bunker-like structures that defy explanation. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church remains tight-lipped, but fringe scholars point to a cryptic line in the text: "When the iron birds gather and the false priests kneel before machines, then shall Zion stir." In an age of drone surveillance and AI-generated sermons, the imagery is uncomfortably precise. But here's the twist: the Kebra Nagast isn't just about chaos. It promises that after the storm, a new spiritual era will dawn, one led not by Rome or Mecca, but by Africa. This isn't doomsaying, it's a recalibration of sacred geography, a reminder that the world's oldest Christian nation might hold the keys to its future. Whether the Ark's revelation brings war or enlightenment depends entirely on who's ready to listen, and who's determined to silence it. The village of Woolpit, England, 1200 and something. A harvest moon hangs low over the barley fields when two children stumble out of a ditch, their skin the color of moss, their clothes woven from some strange, shimmering fabric. When the villagers gather around, the children don't react to the torchlight, as if their eyes aren't adjusted to this world. Their speech is garbled, sing-song, nothing like Saxon or Norman tongues. And then there's the detail that still sends chills down historians' spines. The children refuse all food until someone offers them raw green beans, which they devour like starved animals. Were these the offspring of some underground civilization, as one medieval chronicler suggested? The kids claim to come from a place called St. Martin's Land, where the sun never rose and the light was perpetual twilight. Some researchers think they might have been Flemish refugees, their greenish tinge from malnutrition, their garbled speech an obscure dialect. Flanders was under brutal siege at the time, and the greenish pallor of anemia or hunger could explain the eerie skin tone. But then there's the boy who sickened and died within months while the girl adapted, her skin fading to normal as she learned English and even married a local man. Malnutrition doesn't just vanish. Modern theorists lean wilder. The green hue, radiation poisoning from some long-lost subterranean city, or even exposure to another dimension's atmosphere. Their rejection of all food but beans, a sign their bodies couldn't process our world's nutrients yet, like an astronaut's gut struggling with alien microbes. Some even tie the tale to folklore of the fairy folk, those elusive beings said to dwell in hollow hills, occasionally losing children to our world through forgotten doorways. But here's the most haunting possibility. What if the Woolpit children weren't lost but abandoned? Their description of a twilight realm matches no known geography, yet it echoes eerily with accounts of near-death experiences or so-called liminal spaces. Maybe they slipped through some cosmic rip, victims of a universe folding in ways we still can't map. The girl's eventual assimilation suggests something even stranger, that our world reshapes those who stay long enough, rewriting their very biology until they belong. Or perhaps the truth is simpler, sadder. The chronicles never mention the children's parents. In an age of famine and war, two odd-looking orphans might have been a convenient canvas for all kinds of stories. Whatever the case, the green children of Woolpit refuse to fade into myth. They linger at the edge of history, a reminder that some mysteries aren't puzzles to be solved, but mirrors reflecting whatever fears or hopes we bring to them. Point Pleasant, West Virginia, November 15, 1966. A chilly night, the kind where breaths hang visible in the air and the Ohio River flows black under a moonless sky. That's when the first eyewitnesses saw it, a towering figure 7 feet tall with wings like stained glass shards and eyes that glowed red as brake lights. They called it Mothman. Over the next year, more than 100 people would swear they'd encountered the creature, their descriptions uncannily similar: leathery wings, no visible head, and those piercing, unblinking eyes that seemed to bore into their souls. But here's where the legend twists from eerie to unnerving. Exactly 13 months after the first sighting, on December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge Point Pleasant's lifeline across the Ohio collapsed during rush hour, sending 46 souls plummeting into the icy water. The Mothman vanished that same night. Coincidence or something far more unsettling? Eyewitness accounts from the bridge collapse survivors add fuel to the mystery. Several reported seeing a dark, winged shape circling overhead moments before the structure groaned and buckled. One truck driver, barely escaping his cab as it tipped into the river, swore something had been watching from the girders, something that didn't so much fly as glide, unnaturally silent. Engineers later confirmed the bridge's failure was due to a single cracked eyebar, a flaw invisible to routine inspections. But why had the Mothman appeared before the disaster, as if sounding an alarm no one understood? Cryptozoologists point to similar cases: the owlman of Cornwall, the Jersey Devil entities spotted before tragedies, as if drawn to impending doom. Skeptics argue it's classic confirmation bias. People forget the 100 times a weird bird is just a weird bird, but the one time it coincides with catastrophe, it burns into legend. Yet the Mothman's legacy isn't just about a bridge. It's about the uncomfortable intersection of folklore and precognition. Native tribes in the region had long spoken of winged omens, creatures that heralded upheaval. The Shawnee told of the pale hawk, a spirit that appeared before wars or plagues. Even John Keel, the journalist who chronicled the Mothman phenomenon, became convinced the creature wasn't biological but paranormal, a manifestation of what he called ultraterrestrials, beings that exist just beyond our perception, occasionally crossing over to warn or torment. His theory gains eerie traction when you consider the UFO sightings and menacing Men in Black reports that plagued Point Pleasant alongside the Mothman. The modern obsession with Mothman as prophet says more about us than the creature. In an age of climate disasters and pandemics, we're desperate for signs, patterns, anything to make chaos feel predictable. Point Pleasant's annual Mothman Festival thrives on this hunger, mixing kitsch with genuine unease. Visitors peer up at the town's gleaming silver statue, its wings outstretched, and wonder, was it a harbinger or did we make it one by stitching meaning onto coincidence? The bridge's replacement stands sturdy now, but the question lingers, as persistent as those glowing red eyes in the rearview mirror. Maybe the scariest part isn't that the Mothman foresaw disaster, but that we'll never know if it was trying to stop it or simply waiting to bear witness. Deep in the frozen taiga of Siberia, where the Evenki people have whispered to spirits for centuries, there are stories older than memory of sky gods who grow restless when humans take more than the earth can give. So when June 30th, 1908 dawned with a fireball brighter than 1,000 suns, flattening 800 square miles of forest in an instant, the Evenki didn't call it a meteor. They called it Ogdi, the god of thunder, finally unleashing his wrath. The Tunguska event remains one of history's most baffling cosmic mysteries. At 7:14 in the morning, near the Podkaimanaia Tunguska River, something exploded with the force of 15 million tons of TNT, 1,000 times more powerful than Hiroshima. Trees were snapped like matchsticks for miles, their trunks radiating outward in a terrifying butterfly pattern. Caravans of reindeer were reduced to charred skeletons. Shockwaves circled the globe, yet miraculously no crater was ever found. Scientists still debate the cause, a comet fragment vaporizing midair, a rogue black hole, but the Evenki have no such doubts. Their shamans had warned of this for generations. Long before the blast, elders spoke of visions where the sky would split like rotten bark, punishing those who mined the land without offering. The Evenki, nomadic reindeer herders, lived by strict reciprocity. Take only what you need, honor the spirits, leave gifts of tobacco in sacred trees. But by the early 20th century, outsiders were flooding Siberia, fur traders stripping the forests, gold prospectors tearing up riverbeds. The shamans grew uneasy. They dreamed of Ogdi pacing the celestial realms, his patience wearing thin. Then came the morning the sky turned white. What's chilling isn't just the prophecy's accuracy, but its aftermath. The blast epicenter was eerily close to a sacred Evenki ritual site, yet left their nearby camps untouched, as if the destruction had been meticulously targeted. Stranger still, Soviet scientists who later interviewed survivors noted that the Evenki refused to discuss the event without first making offerings. The sky wasn't angry, one shaman insisted. It was correcting. Modern researchers scoff at supernatural explanations, yet the coincidences pile up. The Tunguska event occurred during the Great Conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, an astrological omen of upheaval. The Evenki lunar calendar marked that day as Umaksa, when spirits cleanse the world. Even the blast's unique electromagnetic effects, mysterious nighttime glow across Europe for weeks, mirror shamanic descriptions of the veil between worlds thinning. Perhaps the most unsettling question isn't whether the Evenki predicted Tunguska, but how many other indigenous warnings we've dismissed. From the Maoris' Taniwa guarding fault lines to Hopi prophecies of rivers burning, these aren't just myths, they're millennia of ecological wisdom wrapped in metaphor. The Tunguska event didn't just vaporize trees, it exposed the arrogance of assuming nature's balance can be exploited without consequence. The Evenki still leave tobacco in the charred groves, listening for Ogdi's next lesson, and wondering if the world will hear it this time. From the trembling lips of oracles to the cryptic verses etched in ancient texts, humanity's obsession with prophecy is as old as civilization itself. We've built temples to unravel fate, waged wars over whispered predictions, and reshaped entire societies based on visions of what might come. But strip away the mysticism and what's left? A profound, almost primal need to believe that the chaos of existence has meaning, that somewhere, somehow, the universe is leaving us breadcrumbs toward a destiny we can't yet see. Consider the paradox at the heart of every prophecy we've explored. The Oracle of Delphi's riddles only held power because kings chose to act on them. The Mayan calendar's so-called end date became a global panic not because of anything the Maya wrote, but because we projected our anxieties onto their math. Even Nostradamus, the grandmaster of vague predictions, thrives not because his quatrains are infallible, but because we keep bending them to fit our crises. This raises the unsettling question: are prophecies divine visions or just mirrors reflecting our own fears and desires back at us? yet dismissing them all as coincidence feels just as reckless. There's something undeniably eerie about the Hopi Blue Star quatrain appearing in the skies as climate disasters intensify, or the way the Tunguska event mirrored indigenous warnings about ecological imbalance. Science might explain the mechanics of comets and gas leaks, but it can't silence the whisper that some patterns are too precise to ignore. Maybe prophecies aren't about predicting the future at all, maybe they're about recognizing the cycles we're too close to see. The Norse knew Ragnarok wasn't the end, but a reset. The Zoroastrians saw fire not just as punishment, but purification. These weren't doomsday cults, they were cultures that understood history doesn't move in a straight line. So here's the challenge for all of us, here in the age of algorithms and AI. Will we use these ancient warnings as excuses to resign ourselves to fate, or as invitations to change it? The Sibyl burned her books because some knowledge is too heavy for mortals to carry. The Brahman seer laughed as molten lead swallowed him, knowing his predictions would outlive his executioners. Every prophecy we've uncovered carries the same implicit dare not to wait for destiny, but to wrestle with it. Now it's your turn. Which of these legends lingers in your mind like an unshakable dream? The Banshee's wail, the Ark's hidden thunder, or something we didn't cover today? Drop your favorite below, and while you're at it, ask yourself, if you'd stood before the Pythia or held the Sibylline Books, what would you have done with the future they offered? The most thrilling prophecy of all might be the one we're writing together right now in the comments.